Go. How you doing, people? Welcome. Episode 60 of the Sports Therapy Association podcast. Fashionably late as always, 8:03. It's never going to change. Sorry. How are you doing? I'm going to say, first of all, I'm very tired this evening. Fortunately, I've got a guest who I couldn't have a more bubbly guest. So I'm hoping that between the two of us, we'll get like just a norm and it'll be fine. It's just this heat is lovely. And I've been running every day. Those of you who've been following me on social media know I'm doing this run a day challenge thing, which is great. But it's just running in this heat. And I've been warning people about running in the heat, and I'm finally feeling it myself now. I'm forgetting words. Plus, of course, I'm getting older. So between the two of them. But anyway, thanks for joining us. If you're listening to the podcast, and that's fantastic, we appreciate it. Obviously, these are recorded live. And you can join us either by going to the Sports Therapy Association Facebook page, or if you prefer, you can join us by going to our YouTube channel. We stream live on that as well. And either way of joining us, you'll be able to comment, ask the guest questions. And when you do comment, you can bring questions up on the screen. For example, Catherine is now in the room here, and I can bring Catherine up, and it says, Catherine Reimer said, hi, everyone. Hi, Catherine. How you doing? Thanks for joining us. So yeah, if you do listen to this on the podcast and you fancy joining us, you haven't got to be an STA member. You haven't even got to be a sports therapist. Just as long as you're a soft tissue therapist with the desire to improve your knowledge and network with others, then you're welcome. Come through the door and you'll have a good time. And also give you a chance to see what we kind of do and how we roll with the STA. In case you are a therapist who wants to join, probably one of the best PA organizations in the world. It's up to you. No pressure. Right, so before we go into today's episode, a huge thanks to Dr. Deepak Ravindran from last week. Some fantastic emails and people just telling me, I've just bought the book. By the way, I'm not getting shares on any, I'm not involved in it. I wish I was. I wish I got 5 pence every time someone told me they bought the book. But it is worth buying. And like I say, it's the price of 3 cups of coffee, which I also haven't drunk now for the whole of July. No coffee free. Peppermint tea, that's all I'm doing. But yeah, for the price of 3 lattes, you can get what I think is probably one of the best, for its price, pound for pound, one of the best bits of information that I've read this year, to tell you the truth, mainly because of the price. I don't like spending too much, and it's well worth it. So if you have got £11.20 or something and you fancy investing in something, then do yourself and your patients a favor and download either on Kindle or get the paperback, The Pain-Free Mindset by Dr. Deepak Ravindran, who coincidentally has a relationship with our guest tonight. There's a nice segue I didn't realize from this when Liz Bayley, today's guest, was working in that area. So I'll be asking her about that. I'm not surprised. All these great minds work together. Don't forget also that now another way of listening to the podcast is going straight to the Sports Therapy Association webpage. I'm uploading them all to there now, so you can stay on that page, read the little show notes, and you can listen to it there if you want to watch the video. So that's another option for you. Just go to the Sports Therapy Association.co.uk, and it's all up there, as with all the episodes I'm slowly uploading as well. There we go. Right then. So tonight's guest, by popular demand, we're starting to bring part of the people who've already been on the show back, and very, very close to the top. I can't say at the top because it would just make people, she was at the top. I can't find an excuse now. She was at the top. We saw Liz back in January, which was really interesting because it was in the heart of lockdown. So Liz gave us a fantastic episode on online consultations. And that's all changed now, obviously. Well, not completely, but we're in a new norm. And Liz is back and is going to be talking to us about working now that she's managed to get back to work with pro dancers, not just West End, but obviously dancers of that caliber. So really looking forward to that. As I say, when you're joining us, people are joining in the room, then feel free to ask questions. Yeah, if you see me rattling on, I will keep an eye on the questions. I've told Liz she can keep an eye on the questions too. So yeah, this is all for you, this show. So if you've got an interesting question for Liz, then do bring it up. Right, that said and done, I think I will stop talking and bring up the wonderful Liz Bayley with a Y. Hey, Liz Bayley with a Y, how are you?
I'm glad that you're finally remembering how to spell my name, Matt. Everyone gets it wrong. It's fine.
I know. I put out the advert, and it was obviously the biggest thing on my mind. And everywhere I did it, and I got the picture right, and everywhere. And then I think in one bit of text somewhere on Facebook, I spelled it as in Bill Haley, one of my heroes. And yeah,
that's okay.
Sorry about that.
Don't worry.
I was almost over it, and I was watching one of your other podcasts. I think it was Chewing It Over with Jack, and at the end of that, Jack said, "How can people find you?" And you went, "Oh, just very easy, Liz Bayley with a Y." And I thought, "Oh my god, she can see me through the screen. This is terrible." Anyway, good to see you. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm really hot. I can see in the comments everyone's like, "I'm sweating. I'm dying." Me too. If it makes you feel any better, I've got a fan on me. I thought I'd look like Beyonce with my fan, but it's not blowing my hair around. I'm okay. Thanks for joining me, everyone. It's hot evening.
It is, which is why, if you have joined us live, then kudos to you. Thank you very much. I'm sure you much prefer to be sitting in front of a fan eating ice cream. Thanks, Liz. Thanks so much. It's interesting that it's so good that last time we spoke to you, it was in the lockdown. And obviously as a physio, you were still able to see people, but you had a different role, didn't you, back then as well? Have things changed since then?
Yeah, things have changed a lot for me since January. So when I spoke to you in January, I had just left my job, even though physios were allowed to work. I was worried because of my personal situation about getting COVID, and I'd quit my job. I was an FCP, and I was working in Berkshire, which is underneath Deepak Ravanjan. So that's how I know of him. So he was my clinical lead when I was an FCP, because I used to work in Ascot. But I had just quit that job, and I sort of was unemployed for about 4 months, doing online bits and pieces with dancers, but not a lot. And then I started my job in June when all the theatres started opening again. So now I'm happy to say I'm back in the theatres, even though, as a lot of you will know, a lot of the shows have had to close in the last couple of weeks because of COVID. So we're a long way from being out of it, but at least I'm working, and theatres are open so long as COVID doesn't get in the way of that. Like famously Cinderella, which is Andrew Lloyd Webber's new show, which I'm a physio on, which is fantastic. Incidentally, I work underneath a company called West End Osteopathy with a guy called Fabi, who's like West End royalty. So I work under their company on all the different shows that I work on. But I was working on Cinderella. I saw the show last week, which is part of my job, which I boast about on Twitter being the best part of the job. And then it was meant to be their opening night last night, and they've had to close for 10 days because they had one person test positive. And even though everyone else has tested negative, the government guidelines mean that they can't open for 10 days. So Andrew Lloyd Webber has been very vocal about how devastating it is for the theatre industry. Of course it is. It's not the only show either. There's been others. Hairspray had to close. There's another one that I'm working on that's currently in reduced rehearsals. What else? Hamilton had to sort of change the way they were rehearsing because of a COVID test. So it's a big deal. So even though I am back in theatre, we're a long way from being back to normal. But, I was sitting in the theatre on Thursday watching a show. So we're nearly there.
Nearly there. And we can hear, people listening to the podcast, obviously you can't see Liz on the screen, but I guarantee that physically she's as passionate as she sounds. She is so excited. Your face lights up when you're talking about theatre. And I could see how devastated you were. I love the way that so many people were kind of, it's as if something had died. Someone had died, as if your little dog had died or something. I'm so sorry, Liz. Oh, it must be terrible, Liz.
I know.
People are so sympathetic to you.
People are so empathic, aren't they? Because I tweeted, Cinderella's had to close, and I was only on Thursday, and people, oh my God, Liz, are you okay? I'm like, it's okay, I'll survive. It's okay.
Like 10 days.
I know. Well, actually, the thing that Andrew Lloyd Webber put out was quite unclear. I had to find out myself from my contacts in the show whether or not it was closed for good, because I was like, oh my God, is it closed for good? But it hasn't. It's going to open again. Thank God. Can you imagine? They'd only done a couple of weeks of previews, they called, so they hadn't officially opened. So I saw what was a preview. And the show is incredible, by the way. It's really funny. So if anyone likes musical theatre, Cinderella's a really good one to go and see when it opens again. Yeah.
I think I saw it once with Christopher Biggins, I think down Worthing Pier. Is it the same production?
No, it's not the same at all. That's not the same at all. That's not.
Oh, it's a different production.
That's definitely different. Yeah. No, it's kind of it's a twist on the story, and yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Right. So, thanks, Glenn. Glenn has joined us. Glenn Murphy says, just watching under a tree with an ice cold drink. Very nice.
Lucky you.
Very nice. And then Gary, founder of Sports Therapy Associations, in the house as well. Evening all, melting here, but just had a great thunderstorm. Is that a metaphor or euphemism or something, Gary, or do you actually mean it? I'm not quite sure what that means. I just hope you're well and happy and I've got a load off your chest. Anyway, there we go. And Stephen Waterson's in the house. Hey, Stephen, how you doing? Greetings, all. Been coaching. Sorry for late arrival. You're fine. It's very laid back here.
You've not
Steve,
missed anything yet.
So I'm interested as well, because obviously I think you'd agree, since, well, in terms of speaking and being on podcasts, you did Therapy Live, which was fantastic. And you had how many people? Did you know how many people were watching at one point? Did you have a little clicker
For
in the
me,
top?
I don't know. It was quite a big number. It was much more than I thought it was going to be. Well, I can't remember what it was, because it was different. Like, they gave you lots of different data, but I mean, it wasn't up there with the really big talks, but I wouldn't expect everyone to want to hear about dance. But comparatively, I didn't think I'd get that many people, and we got loads, and I got really good ratings, which was
fantastic.
So it was good. So I think whoever did listen to it got a lot out of it, I think. So that's really good. Yeah,
I think one of the things that came out of it, and the feedback I saw on social media, was, although you'd think that working with dancers is a little niche group, I don't know whether it's the way you tell it or whether it's just a fact and it needs someone to tell it, but you can get so much out of listening how people work with dancers and then apply it to any athlete. And there's a lot of crossovers, isn't there?
Yeah,
which we'll look at tonight.
Yeah,
exactly.
They are. I mean, when I was professional dancer, I didn't define myself as an athlete at all, but I should have. And that's partly what we'll talk about, I think. It's the way that it's seen culturally, dancers definitely identify as artists first, but they are performing. They're performing athletes, is what we like to call them. So it's really important that the things that have been done in sports for a long time are now brought over to dance, and they're starting to be, I think. So that's exciting.
That's really interesting. We're going to have to come back to that, because I just maybe have to add a question here to my little crib sheet now.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that. Before we do, because I think one of the lovely things about you is that the way you do explain things makes you very accessible for both therapists and dancers themselves, which I think is ideal in this world, because it should be. We should be speaking a more common language. I don't know whether you do it on purpose or whether it's something you've practiced, but I'm hoping that, especially now that your name's more out there, dancers will tune in and listen to this podcast thinking, oh, wow, I've heard of Liz Bayley. So let's have a little intro to any dancers watching this. Why should they be listening to you? Give us a little bit about your background, because it is very impressive.
Dance-wise, okay, as a dancer. So I danced since I was 3 years old. It's always been what I've done. It was always like my sort of special talent, I guess. It's what I did my whole life. So I danced from the age of, so I'm going to work out a way of telling this faster. So I danced from the age of 3. I trained mainly in ballet when I started, but that's a classical dance form, so it's a really good grounding for everything. When I went professional, so I decided not to go to stage school. I actually ended up going to university and did my first degree in psychology, because I've always been quite academic and like doing that. And I just thought it was the sensible thing to do. I'm really terribly sensible most of the time. So once I'd done my degree, I kept dancing while I was at university as well at a really high level. So I was doing like advanced ballet classes, and I was nipping to London and doing professional classes and things. So I started dancing professionally when I was 21 and danced for like 15 years as a professional dancer. I never had an agent. So I did the kind of jobs, lots of stuff abroad. I ended up specializing in Latin and ballroom in 2008. Trying to think sort of how long ago that was now. 2008 was when I was kind of at the height of my professional Latin and ballroom stuff with a full-time dance partner, and we were talking to Strictly about being one of the professional couples. That's the kind of level we were at. Kind of just helps people understand the kind of thing we were doing. We also specialized in Argentine tango. I did lots of cabaret work. So I worked at the Moulin Rouge in Paris for a year. I think most people know. I always think people know that, but then it comes up in conversation. Well, you think that, but it comes up in conversations and people are like, oh, I didn't know you worked there. I'm like, I talk about it non-stop. How could you not know? But that was a very cool contract. It was hard. So most professional shows are about 8 shows a week. In Paris, it's 12 shows a week. So you do 2 shows every night with 1 day off, obviously. It's really physical because there's a can-can dance in it. The costumes are huge. The can-can dance is really hard. Gave me proximal hamstring tendinopathy in both legs, which again I've talked about. I had back injuries. I had various bits and pieces on that show. That was quite a hard one, but it's also what got me interested in being a physio, because once I started to get injured, I sort of found it really interesting. And then halfway through my dance career, I kind of said, well, I'm going to have to do something eventually. I ended up doing sports therapy, as you know. So I was a sports therapist for a good 7 or 8 years. Then I wanted to take it further. So I did a master's degree in, I did a master's degree in physio at King's. Gary.
Sorry, people listening to the podcast should realise that Gary Benson was one of the tutors on your and mine when we did sports therapy way back in the day. So Gary's just he's still banging on about that, Liz.
I think he might be talking about Moulin Rouge.
Is he about the can? No, right.
So then I've been a physio for about 5 or 6 years now. But altogether, as a sports therapist and a physio, I've been working clinically with dancers for about 12 years. I've calculated it as. So it's quite a long time, actually, isn't it? And I danced professionally and did sports therapy at the same time at the end of my dancing career. So and that was when I worked in all the big theatres in London as a sports therapist. I'm happy to say I'm now back in the big theatres in London, but as a physio, which was my ultimate goal, because I just wanted to have a little bit more knowledge, a slightly higher qualification, and be able to be a bit more autonomous, which I definitely am. And it's great. So I'm really sort of where I wanted to be.
Fantastic. Great summary. You did well, considering you started at the age of 3. That is a good content those years. Fantastic. Just saying a hi to we've got royalty here today. We've got David Poulter's in the house. Fantastic.
Hi, David.
Must have stopped cycling for a second, or is he kind of cunningly watching? Probably
likely
still
on a bike, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
I suspect he's on a bike. Thanks for watching, David.
Good to see you, Dave.
I appreciate it.
So fantastic. Yeah, I just think that's important, because I have the impression that when you try and get in to see dancers, that maybe they prefer to see someone who's been a dancer and knows it. They might, I know it's like with martial artists, because I worked with martial artists for a while, and because they knew that I'd done a bit of martial arts and had a couple of fights, it was kind of an opening door. But I know other therapists where if you haven't done it, then they're not going to see you. They don't think you don't know what it's like. Is that true with dancers? Is it fair to say, or is it a generalization?
Yeah, probably. With any kind of specialist sport, it's always been like when I was injured, if I could see someone that had a background in dance or worked with dancers, it was a massive sell for me. I would always think, oh, I'll definitely go and see them. It's just because there's a lot of language in dance and terminology that you can share. You can say, like with the dancers that I work with now, someone got injured a couple of weeks ago and they were doing a particular move. And as soon as they described it, I knew exactly what they meant. I even described it back to them. They were like, yeah, that's it. It's just, it means that you can talk on the same level. I've got an understanding. I know exactly how it feels to be in rehearsals for 3 weeks, to get injured, to have the threat of your career be taken away. And like you said about runners, it's definitely part of your identity. So if you both identify as a dancer first, and I always will, even though I'm a physio now, it just gives you common ground. It definitely helps the therapeutic relationship. It's really important. But then you've got people like, I sort of say my partner in crime. So Bill Taylor, who is the consultant physio for the Scottish Ballet, when he started with dancers, he hadn't danced. And he says himself, he bought a book and he learned the terminology and he went and watched shows and he kind of engrossed himself in the world so that he could work with dancers. And now he knows everything kind of that I do. I suppose he doesn't have the experience I do as a physical dancer, being injured and that stuff, but has a fantastic rapport with dancers, still having never been one, but he's worked with them for a long time. So I know the dancers adore him, so yeah.
He's an adorable sort of chap. We had him on the show as well, isn't he? I can imagine him getting on with anyone.
Yeah. It's that Scottish accent, that's what it is.
Something about that, yeah. Definitely a little bit of a bromance, I think. He was great. So, right, there's so much we could talk to you, but I think to start off, let's take it down to real basics and maybe start off with a summary of the sort of injuries you see, so that the therapists here and the dancers listening will be able to kind of think, oh, yeah, I know about that, or I've had that, or... So what are the sort of maybe top 3 or 4
common injuries?
Yeah.
So the top traumatic injury is going to be a lateral ankle sprain, almost certainly. I think it is in most sports. It definitely is in dance. But apart from that, on the side, or something in the knee, like a meniscus or a MCL or an ACL, those kinds of injuries, traumatic injuries. But put them to the side, because traumatic injuries really aren't the biggest thing for dancers. The really big deal for dancers is overuse injuries. And it all comes down to too much too soon, not enough rest, them not having the capacity really to do what they're being asked to do, all of that stuff. So with overuse injuries, we're definitely talking tendinopathies. If I think that my last month at work, I've seen probably tendinopathy of every tendon going. That includes upper limb and lower limb too, because although I work with people always think dancers get lower limb injuries, and of course they do. It's a huge part of it. But in musical theatre, they get a lot of upper limb injuries as well, because they do all kinds of different choreography. So they do floor work, they do partnering, which ballet dancers do as well. But the costumes cause them injuries, the very heavy costumes. They have to use props, which is often when you get lateral epicondylitis or medial epicondylitis, lots of wrist stuff because of various postures they have to make. So you really do see, and this is what I like about musical theatre, is that you see a real array of injuries. It's not just the lower limb, although the lower limb is still very prominent in the injuries that we see. So, I mean, like I say, tendinopathy wise, we had Achilles tendinopathy, peroneal tendinopathy, what were the other ones? Posterior tibialis, patella tendinopathy, gluteal tendinopathy. They're the ones I can just think off the top of my head that I've seen in the last 2 weeks. Like, tendinopathies are rife for sure. And on top of that, so you've got your lateral ankle sprains, you've got, knee stuff. So with the younger dancers particularly, you get lots of patella, femoral pain. You get fat pad impingement quite a lot with dancers, especially when they're hypermobile, because the way that the knee hyperextends and it puts pressure on the fat pad. Or from trauma, because often they'll be doing stuff kneeling. So I've had a couple of traumatic fat pad impinge or fat pad irritation things. Lots of hip stuff, so labral issues, like snapping hip is a big one for dancers. So either internal or external. So you get snapping hip of the ITB, or you get it inside with the iliopsoas tendon. Definitely get lots of that stuff. What else? And all the back things, every back injury you can think of, low back and neck is a big one for musical theatre, really big. So you asked for the top 3. I've just given you like.
I can't. Trying to think of something you haven't mentioned.
Yeah,
I think
that's the point though. Like, they literally get every injury going, and it's because, particularly musical theatre, it's because of the way they have to use their whole body and the costumes. Like I said, the footwear. Necks are a big one in musical theatre because of the headgear and the wigs that they have to wear. Some of the wigs in, like for example in Cinderella, are huge. So you have to. I work a lot with the performers about neck strength. Some of the other big shows that people would know about, I'm going to try and be non-specific when I talk about this stuff. Big costumes on the head, and they have to do things like they have to move their head back with these great big things, and of course the amount of strength it takes in the neck to be able to do that, and then when they're rehearsing, it's repetitive, so they don't just do it once, they're doing it 25 times, and they haven't done it before, so you can see where the injuries come from.
Interesting.
It's the rehearsals are the absolute worst part for dancers, and because recently all the shows have opened up at the same time, so all of these different shows went into rehearsal at the same time. Normally they wouldn't have done. Normally shows closed, shows open. So the company I work with, West End Osteopathy, are having to deal with every single show being in rehearsal, and that's when you get the most injuries. So it's been really busy, really busy. So there you go. Like I say, that's about 50 injuries for you. But shoulders, I mean, you get loads of shoulder stuff too. So shoulders, wrists, elbows, the whole lot.
How long, say working back from, I'm just thinking in my mind of like a marathon or something, and 16 weeks training for the marathon. What sort of time window do you have before the performances start where you're working with these athletes? Yeah,
so you mean how much rehearsal do they get?
Well, when you first get to see them, I want to ask you in a little bit about screening, maybe.
Okay, we can talk for ages about that.
But before I do that, what sort of time period do you get where you meet them for the first time and you give a chance for them to say, look, I've got a bit of history, I'm a bit worried about that, can you take this up or something? What sort of time do you get?
Well, basically you meet them as the contract starts. So although you've got, say, 4 to 6 weeks of rehearsal, they will be meeting you, and the next day they'll be in rehearsal. So you don't really have prep time. This is something that we're working on. So there's a particular show that I work on, which we are now, I say we, it's me and one other guy, we're now full-time physios on this West End show. And that is kind of unprecedented. It's a really big deal, because normally physios are brought in as a kind of reactive thing for treatment. So the performers do what they need to do, and if someone gets injured, physios come in the theatre, they patch them up, literally, unless it's really bad, you send them off for referrals and things. But it's not a preventative thing at all, and it's a real cultural phenomenon, and it's something that's starting to change. And a good example is the fact that me and this guy that I work with are now full-time paid physios all the time in the theatre when the show's on, which really hasn't happened before. So I'm so excited because it puts me in the position where I can do preventative stuff now. However, we've only just started. So had we been brought in before COVID, we could have been working with all these performers through the whole COVID thing to keep them fit. Like in some of the ballet companies, like Scottish Ballet, for example, they've always had full-time physios because ballet is ahead of the curve much more than musical theatre. So their physio and S&C team have been keeping all the dancers up to scratch pretty much. It's not perfect from what I understand, but it's very good. It's certainly better than nothing. So we haven't had a chance to do that because we've just come in. But now that we're there, we've got the capacity to do that. So if and this is the thing, once the show's open, we can start to really make a difference, because while they're in rehearsals, they're so overloaded with the amount of work they're doing. You can't throw a load of S&C stuff at them because they just wouldn't tolerate it. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't be very popular. And it's not worth it. They just, at this point, they've all come out of a COVID situation. They're not really show fit, a lot of them. And we're just trying to get them through rehearsals. But now, for the first time, like I say, we're in this capacity where we're full time, so we can really make a difference in that way. And it starts with screening. So that was going to be your question, wasn't it?
I think so, because I mean, and again, I know nothing about this, so excuse me if I come out with some ridiculous questions, but do you get to see, with the years dealing with various productions, do you get to see the same kind of professionals working in different shows? You get to build up a relationship with them so you know what their weaknesses are and you can get their rapport, or is it kind of a new cast, new people?
Yeah, sometimes it's a really small world. So even if you don't work with the same people, you know everyone who knows everyone. But yes, I've definitely worked with a few of the same people here and there, but mostly it's new people, I would say, sort of. Maybe it's a bit of both. But what we do so screening is something that's sort of been around in dance for a little bit, but it used to be very different from what it's becoming now. And I say that from my point of view in the dance physios that I work with. And I'd like to think, I'm crossing my fingers, that we're quite progressive in what we're doing. So we're kind of going down, like I say, that sort of sports avenue. We're trying to really be sciencey about it. Very, very technical word, sciencey, but we're trying to be evidence-based, do things that really make a difference. So when I started doing screening with students and various colleges, which was probably, I've been doing it 12 years, 8 to 10 years ago. So it's quite a long time ago now. I did what I knew was right then. And what that basically was like, it's like an audition screen. So you're kind of looking at it from the point of view of the company, which is this dancer suitable to do the contract we're going to get them to do? So you're looking for problems and you're trying to work out, can they do it? So it's very much a kind of, you look at posture, you look at things like scoliosis, you look at things like hypermobility. That was a big one. I say it was, I don't do that anymore, and I'll tell you why in a minute. You look at alignment, you look at muscle length, things like that. So you're trying to work out if the dancer has the capacity to do what you want them to do. But they were very kind of what I would call old-fashioned tests and things, because really, what does alignment? Well, actually, alignment does tell you a certain amount in technique. Dance technique is quite predictive of future injuries. But if you're looking at things like, and again, I'm contradicting myself, I was going to say scoliosis. If you have a massive scoliosis, it might make a difference as their capacity, but a little bit. You see lots of scoliosis in dancers because they come from that population where there can be hypermobility and there can be connective tissue issues. But again, if it's just a small scoliosis, does it matter? I see loads of dancers with a little bit of scoliosis who dance beautifully and don't have any problems with it. But if they were going into, say, a big ballet company, they might be ruled out for that, not always, if it's more mild. But what we're coming to understand now is that what really matters is strength, conditioning, and functional ability. So now when we look at screening, certainly this is what I did at the beginning of the contracts that we've just started. We're looking at things like counter movement jump heights and single leg hop distances, and people's ability to do a star excursion balance test, or their balance, or what else? Press up capacity, or a seated medicine ball throw. So we're looking at upper limb strength and capacity, cardio capacity we measure as well, if possible, because things like cardiovascular fitness make a difference to injury risk, because if you're performing a show and you start to get tired, you're more likely to get injured. So, and people always think dancers are fit, but they're not. Dance really is a skills-based thing. It's not a fitness-based thing. When dancers do dance classes, it's to learn how to be a dancer. It's not to improve your cardiovascular fitness. 50% of a dance class, I read this somewhere, 50% of a dance class is you standing around watching the others. So you might be in a 90-minute dance class, but you're not dancing that whole time. And one thing you definitely do is the anaerobic bit. So you'll get up and do a 2-minute jump thing. But dancers tend to be sort of just fit enough to dance. They don't tend to excel with their fitness that they're dancing. And this is the kind of thing that we can make a difference with as physios and strength and conditioning coaches, because it's definitely an area where they're lacking and they don't know that. That's the key thing. Dancers think they're fit. I used to think I was fit. I was terrible. I was the laziest dancer in the world. I never did anything extra because it wasn't part of the culture. I didn't think I needed to. I assumed I was fit because I was a dancer. And then whenever I had a break from a contract, I'd sit on my bum and watch TV and like eat chocolate and think, oh, well, I'll dance in 3 weeks, it'll be fine. And of course, then if I did have any fitness from the show I just finished, I'd lose it over that period. And then when I went into rehearsals, I'd really struggle for 2 to 3 weeks. The burn was real. I remember having DOMs and hardly being able to breathe because I just didn't cross train, because I didn't know. And it's amazing because it happened to me, because we were interviewing the dancers. What we did before we started this set of rehearsals, because it was such and I hate the word, but unprecedented situation with COVID, what we did was give them a quick phone interview first, just to see where they were mentally, physically, what they'd been up to. And I spoke to my boss about it, and we were handing over a few different patients, and he said, yeah, they're not very fit. They've all said they're doing their 10,000 steps a day. But 10,000 steps a day is like for the average office worker. It's not for an elite performer. And yet they thought they were doing the right thing. These dancers were proud of the fact that they'd done their 10,000 steps a day and a bit of stretching, and they thought they were show ready. And when my boss told me that, I have to admit I was a bit annoyed with them. And then I took a moment and thought, just think for a second, Liz, what you used to do as a dancer. Because I forget what I've learned. I forget how much knowledge I've got now. And I didn't do anything when I was dancing. And of course, these dancers think, when I say to them, what exercise have you been doing? They go, oh yeah, I've been stretching. It's like, brilliant. You're already hypermobile. The stretching actually going to help you, but they haven't done cardio. They haven't done strength training. They haven't done balance training, no agility. So that's the message. And I just get, people always say you get so passionate about it, but I do, because it would have made me such a better dancer. I wouldn't have got injured as much. I would have performed better. I would have jumped higher. I wouldn't have been as tired when I was doing like a 3.5 minute full-on salsa routine with lifts and everything with my partner. By the end of it, my nostrils would flare. I was so tired. My cardiorespiratory system was not in any shape to be doing that, but I dread it. I didn't think to cross train outside. Like now it makes so much sense. But when I was dancing, I had absolutely no education at all. I just had my dance classes from when I was younger, and no one that I worked with did it. The most we would ever do would be another dance class. But again, dancers dance, that's fine. What they don't do is cross-train cardiorespiratory. They don't cross-train strength. They don't cross-train balance. So that's the stuff that now when I'm with the dancers that I'm with full time in the shows that I am, I tell them about it and they go, oh, that's exciting. Like, and I have hardly touched the surface. I'm just about to start this. So it's a real experiment. And me and the guy that I'm working with have got lots of plans of what to do. So it might be good to come back and do another podcast and sort of tell you how we've got on. But we're monitoring injury rates, so that at least we're hoping we can maybe write a paper on it or something. I don't know.
I was going to say there's an opportunity here, isn't there? Is there much research into it? Or
no, not in musical theatre. So in ballet there is. Ballet has always been ahead of the curve because there's more funding. They've always had bigger medical teams. But in musical theatre, there's almost nothing at all. So we were like, God, we've got a real opportunity here to collect information, discuss, actually what injuries do occur, and then put preventative measures into place, and then see if it makes a difference. But it's going to be a bit of time coming, because like I said, we've got a load of dancers that right now are still dealing with COVID, and we know them a little bit, but not that well, and I haven't even had a chance to do like a warm up with them yet. So we've got a long way to go, but I've got a lot of plans. They all know about it. They're like, oh God, Liz is on one again. But it's exciting. I sort of can't wait to see the difference that we could potentially make.
So it all kind of fits together, because to make any form of screening or profiling effective, you need to do it earlier than 4 weeks, presumably, before you go live on the first production, isn't it? You need more time than that, because what's the point of uncovering something 4 weeks to go?
Exactly. Well, not even 4 weeks to go, with 1 day before rehearsals start.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's it. So if someone said, oh yeah, I had a knee injury, it's still niggling, it's like, oh, well, tough.
Yeah.
We
What are you going
start
to do?
tomorrow. Yeah. So
Mm.
yeah, absolutely. We need to know it before, really, or ideally, like ballet companies tend to. That's not. I was going to say they tend to hold on to people for longer, but they do in musical theatre. Like I'm just thinking, a couple of the shows. Some of those people in those shows have been in them for 10 years.
Mm.
So the dance captains, for example, have usually been on the show for a long time. They know the whole show back to front, and they can do what's called they can be swings. So swings know every part in the show. So at any time they can go on for any position. And it's part of the whole how we manage injuries thing. It's a huge part of theatre. So the people that are swings often know the shows. Well, they do know the shows back to front, but they've often been in the shows for a long time. So yeah, there is an element of people staying in companies, but sorry, I'm just reading questions off.
Yeah, we'll get to that
I'm
question at
speaking
the
about
end. They're
it.
starting
Yeah.
to pick up now. What was I going to say? So there's not like a show that's running, and there's not like an off-season training camp like any other sport where it just doesn't exist yet.
No, there's no off season. There's no off season. Shows run the whole time, and then when ballet companies again are slightly different. They might have an off season because ballet companies tend to tour. So they'll go to Germany for say 3 months, and then like Japan for 6 months or something. But they might have like a month or two in between where they're not dancing. But musical theatre is non-stop. The show is, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
the dancers on most of the shows I'm working on now have just started a year contract. So they'll definitely be on it for a year. Like I say, a lot of them, it's their 10th year or their 7th year or their 5th year. But there's no break. They get holidays, but they don't get off-season time at all. I mean, apart from COVID, that was a big chunk of off-season, a big chunk of off-season time.
And surely this is where linked with injury, such a high injury prevalence is going to be related to that, isn't it? Because there's not any preparation for it. So yeah, it's very similar to running, where runners can go out 365 days a year. And I used to say running is different than any other sport, but I'm going to say running and dancing are different than any other sport because it's not divided up. It's you're continuously trying to perform every single day of the year and setting yourself. Yeah. Very interesting. So in terms of the reality at the moment, most of the stuff you're dealing with, and this links in with a question from Glenn here, is reactive, where really your goal there, a little bit like a physio at a football game, is to try and do everything you can so they don't have to be pulled off or they can go on tomorrow night or something. Glenn here has asked a question which is kind of about the same sort of thing. Do you just pull them out of the show when injured, when the show's up and running, and let the understudies do their stuff, or do you just strap them up and let Dr. Theatre take over?
Yeah. Both. So it depends on the severity of the injury. So I remember when I first started working in theatre, it was literally like the first show that I ever did as a sports therapist, and they asked me to see someone for their neck. This was years ago, 12 years ago, literally, and they just had neck spasm. I say just. I always do that with muscular injuries. So whenever it's something muscular, I kind of go, oh, because muscles get better quickly and they tend to not be too complicated in general. So I'm like, oh, it's just muscle. Because in my head, I'm thinking, oh, at least it's not bone or tendon or nerve. But they had a neck spasm, which, as we know, can be incredibly uncomfortable. And you certainly would struggle to perform with it. But I didn't know that them not going on was an option. Even though I had done the shows and knew about swings and things, I thought my job was to get them back on stage. So I did a load of trigger point therapy and manual stuff. And the person in question definitely got slightly better range of motion, but I suspect it would have been, by the time they got on stage, they would have frozen up again. We know it's probably short term. So I put them on stage, and the company manager said to me later, why did you put them on? She could have come off, we had a swing. And I felt like such a fool. And in my head, it was because I thought that was my job. I thought I had to keep people on stage. Okay, so that was a long time ago. Now I know that's absolutely not the case. And if someone can't do the job they need to do, they can't do the show. So if they've lost range of motion in their head, can they dance? No. I had someone a few weeks ago. It was a guy had hurt his shoulder from carrying a massive prop, and he couldn't even do shoulder flexion with resistance. And I thought, well, then he can't dance. It's very simple. It's not actually a difficult decision because you're objectively assessing them. Can they do what they need to do? No. Then we need to get the swings involved. So for me, I've sort of made complete peace with it. I'm not a magician. I'm not there to patch them up when they're that badly injured that they're really struggling. The point is they've got systems in place that I don't need to do that. On the whole, there's the odd time when. So with certain shows, with all shows, you've got swings, understudies, and standbys, and they're all different different levels of cover. So like I said, the swings can do any part in the ensemble. That's the basic dance group. And then say you've got loads of people injured, they can also cut the ensemble. So you can actually take parts out of that and still have a show that's up and running, but it's what's called a cut show. So that's two different ways of sorting the show out, but it'll still go ahead. The audience won't know any difference, really. There's maybe one less person on stage, but the audience doesn't really know about that. Then you've got understudies, and so standbys are the people that cover the top parts. So like the Elphabas in Wicked, you know, or Willy Wonka and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Those are standbys are in the building ready to go if the top person can't do the show for some reason. And they're used quite often, like even at the interval, quite often a top, you know, principal will say, I can't go on for whatever reason, and then their standby goes on. So you've actually got people being paid that are in the building just sitting there waiting in case there's a problem, because on those big shows, if you lost your Elphaba, you need a spare Elphaba or the show cannot go ahead. So it's really important to have standbys. And then understudies are the same kind of thing, but with the other parts. So like the slightly less important parts, but obviously parts that you have to make the show run. So the parts that you don't necessarily need to make the show run are the ensemble parts. So you can always cut the ensemble and then everyone kind of gets bumped up. So everybody understudies or covers somebody. So does that make sense? So
yeah.
So if you're in a situation where you've got a cut show and everyone's bumped up, but then there's another injury, you start to get into dangerous ground, because you start to actually get to the point where you could potentially not be able to do the show because you might lose a top person, if that makes sense. And I've had 2 situations in the whole 12 years I've worked where the top person was struggling, and we had a massive meeting. I'm talking me, production managers, company managers, stage managers, the person in question, where we've said, right, can we patch them up? Because if they don't go on, we now don't have someone to cover the other part, because they're going to have to cover them and then everything else gets bumped up, if that makes sense. So it doesn't happen often, but if you have enough injuries or sickness as well, you can get to those points where you kind of need to be able to make quite tricky decisions. Is this going to be a real problem if they go on stage and perform on it? You know, and we've always managed to kind of get around with it, whether that's using over-the-counter medication, bit of reassurance, bit of modification of the part of the show. So in one particular case, I said, they can probably do the part, but we need to change this particular part in the show. And then they worked with a dance captain and they changed it so that they could still go ahead. But what they did was they changed the choreography to make it not as hard. So I don't know if that's all very kind of non-specific, and I'm deliberately being non-specific because I need to be careful talking about people that are in the public eye, you know, but hopefully that makes sense.
No, definitely. And it's interesting because I imagine there is less flexibility. I was comparing it more to like a football game or something where you basically, one of your biggest obstacles is the manager or the coach who just wants to get that player back on. There's not an option, get them back on. And that's kind of, you're always kind of towing that line between doing what your manager says. But it sounds like you've got a lot of strategies in place already and you haven't got that pressure on your shoulders.
More or less, there's a bit of pressure to get people back on stage, and dancers don't like to not go on because it sort of doesn't I say in quotes doesn't look good on them. I suppose there's still that sort of there's a little bit of a stigma. I suppose you don't really want to be the one that goes off injured. But what I like about my involvement is I take it out of their hands. So I say to them, I said to someone the other day, blame it on me. I'm the one that's signing you off. You want to dance, but I'm telling you it's not safe. So what's nice about having a medical professional there is that I can say to the dance captain, they can't do this, this, and this, therefore they can't go on. So there's no argument really. You know, I can always explain it. And that's my job. I need to be very clear, can they go on or not? And if they can't, why not? And then be able to reason that with the artistic team.
Fantastic. Sounds like they're lucky to have you. But your situation, like you say, is different than is there lots of shows that you know of who will not even have someone on site and they'll just make a phone call quickly if one of the dancers has got a problem and it's a bit more of a nightmare. Yeah,
totally. Like touring companies often don't have physios, or they'll just send people out. So if they'll be in Scotland and they'll be like, oh, where's there a physio in Scotland? And they'll send someone to someone they don't even know, you know. So or you've got like the equivalent of off Broadway, so off West End stuff. So smaller companies and smaller shows definitely do not have the resources that I'm involved in. I'm really fortunate to be in the position I am, and the dancers I work with are really fortunate to have it. But it's still not, it wouldn't be for smaller shows. It just isn't. They can't afford it.
Steve's been waiting here patiently in in the side. I can't remember what the name is now. In the wings. He's got a question here. Liz, what is the worst trauma dance injury you've dealt with? Steve wants blurred. Yeah. So there you go. Let's get that. He's been waiting very patiently.
Oh, good. That's a good question.
Have you got a story there?
Yeah, I've got a few. I'm sort of thinking about the worst trauma injury. So there's a couple. There's so because there's partnering work in dance. Actually, both of these come from partnering work in dance that I'm thinking of. So the first one I'm going to talk about was actually a couple of years ago. But there's a bit where the male dancer had to pick the female dancer up and effectively throw her so that she did a big old leap and land, and it was very impressive. But unfortunately, when they came to rehearse it, it was the end of the day. It always is the end of the day because people are tired. This is the whole thing about having cardiorespiratory fitness and endurance, being able to tolerate this stuff. It was the end of the day. The choreographer had said to them, I want you to do it full out. So everyone goes right, and everyone's adrenaline kind of pumps up, and everyone kind of goes for it a bit more than they normally do. So what happened was the girl really went for it, and the boy really went for it, and he threw her just a bit too high. And when she landed, she sprained both her ankles. And it was a really, really nasty sprain. And although ankle sprains don't sound that terrible, when you do both at the same time and the level that she had sprained them, it was a pretty big deal. So that was one of the nastiest. It swelled very quickly. And it was a wheelchair situation and all kinds of stuff. That was a few years ago. But one that sticks in my head particularly. And the other one was another lift situation where a girl got dropped. So similar kind of thing. And again, it was the same thing. It was the last run of the day. Everyone kind of went for it, and she fell on her shoulder and it dislocated. So that was pretty bad. She was hypermobile. She'd had a history of patella dislocations as well, I remember. But yeah, that was pretty bad. I'm trying to think of other ones. They're relatively
I was thinking of the lifts. I remember I was involved in a grease production in the north of Ibiza, San Miguel 2006. And my part was to catch the entertainer. I was just a barman. I just got dragged in to do the grease jump. I think it was Grease Lightning, where he jumps up and he holds him and spins him around and stuff. And it all went wrong. And he just landed on top of me and I dropped him. And fortunately, he was drunk and there wasn't any visible mess, but he couldn't move for a while. But yeah, so I was imagining it was going to be a lift problem.
A lift situation, either lift or falling off scenery. That's a big one too. So actually the worst traumatic injury, but it was a scenery thing. So a scenery, you know how the stage goes up and down and all sorts. So it actually became quite famous in the West End. Again, this was years ago. We're really non-specific about what it was. But a guy got his ankle caught in a bit of the scenery and it came down, and there was some pretty permanent damage done on that one. That was pretty nasty too. Yeah. So it does happen. Yeah.
Yeah. If that's served you, Steve, I'm sure if you need some more gruesome stuff, I mean, Liz will be happy to email some photos or something. Yeah, but hopefully I'll give you so let me have a look. Where are we? Because it's already 10 to 9 already. I'm interested. One of the things that I love about you, and I don't know whether I give this too much weight, but I wonder whether, and you mentioned it earlier, the degree you did in psychology plays an influence in how you treat and how you work and the subjective part of it and assessing anybody. Does it kind of come back? Is there a definite relationship there, do you think?
Yeah, with my psychology. So God, it was a long time ago. I graduated that when I was 21. So that, and here we go, I'm tell you how old I am now. So that was in the year 2000. So it was a long time ago. But I think more than the actual knowledge that I got from that degree, because you do forget it. I mean, God, over 20 years or whatever it is, you know, you do forget it. But I suppose the fact that I was always interested in it is probably what I take forward. So when it comes to the biopsychosocial approach and looking at the whole person, considering people's mental health, and in dance, mental health is a really important one. Lots of dancers struggle with mental health. Lots of performers do. That includes musicians, singers, actors. So the performing arts in general, mental health is a big one. So I've always been interested in it, and I'm always very aware of it. And it's something that I take into account with my assessments, treatments, rehab, all of that stuff. So I think, just my general interest, without doubt, probably does. I hope it complements the work that I do with dancers, but it's something to be really aware of with everybody, obviously, but particularly with performers.
And how much of a factor is it, like you mentioned, the biopsychosocial? So obviously, if you've got somebody who is supposed to be working in the evening, and they're in pain, let's say, we don't know what the injury is. How often, given the population you work with, you've already mentioned the kind of fears and maybe the imposter syndromes or the lack of confidence or whatever, or maybe the opposite, maybe they're too confident. How much is the kind of psychosocial part of it when working with dancers a factor you have to take in consideration?
Well, it can definitely affect how someone responds to an injury, without question. It does in all people that get injuries, doesn't it? Like, if it affects your ability to work, so let's just take an office worker. If they've got some kind of neck issue or back issue or whatever it is, often that can become very negative, and you're starting to look at various different coloured flags with those kinds of situations. And it's the same with dancers. So the thing is, it's much easier for them to get an injury that will stop them from working than an office worker, and often it can be more severe and it could be career ending. So I'm going to go off on a tangent. I have to remember what you just asked me. So about mental health. So yes, so it definitely affects people's ability to cope with an injury. It affects how they respond to rehab. So in my Therapy Live talk, I talked about one particular case. It was a dance student that I used to work with, and I used him because he was such a fantastically motivated, positive example. And I said, I know you should probably use the more difficult ones as case studies, but there was no barrier there at all. And actually, I think his mental attitude and his motivation really helped him achieve such a positive outcome, which is why I used it as an example. But when you get the opposite of that, it can be really detrimental and massive barriers. So you have to start thinking about outward referrals. You have to think about using outcome measures to actually assess how much of a problem it's going to be. So you're looking at emotional well-being, various mental health issues. I've written a blog on this rather than me trying to pull everything from my brain out, but I've done a few blogs on my website. But if you wanted to read about that, it's in the Return to Dance section. And part 1 talks a lot about the subjective and about mental health and emotional and behavioural well-being. And part 2 talks more about the objective part. That's what my Therapy Live talk was about. So if you're interested in it, have a look at the blog rather than me trying to remember it all now. But it is very important. It is in every population, but it definitely is with dancers. And you just need to be aware of it. Quite often they will push to get on stage, but quite often they'll push not to get on stage, or they'll be injured constantly. And that's when you kind of start thinking, oh, why? Because when you sort of look at them, they don't seem that bad, or it's a bit inconsistent. There's just something about it that doesn't add up. And you have to start thinking, well, what's the problem here? There's something else going on that probably isn't that they've got back pain. Maybe it's because they don't want to be a performer, or maybe it's because they want to get out before they get put out. You know what I mean? So they want to kind of quit before the industry quits on them, or something like that. There's lots of self-esteem issues with dancers, definitely. I mean, often people get into the performing arts for validation, without question. So all of that stuff comes into play, and I can handle a lot of that, I suppose. And having been a dancer, I think that helps with the rapport with dealing with that. But being aware of it is the first step. Knowing how to assess it is the next step. That's what my blog talks about a little bit. And then knowing where to refer people onto is the step after that, because there's only so much you can do. I mean, I did a psychology degree, but I'm not a psychologist by any means. What was I going to say? So where to refer onto. So you might be thinking about just a counsellor. You might be thinking about just referring them to the GP for general kind of therapy, or you might be thinking about a sports psychologist, depending on what the problem is. So having those contacts ready for when you need them is really important.
Fantastic. And at the moment in your current role, before I'm going to bring up a shot of your website, because there's a few things that I want to mention. It's a great website. When you're in your current role, if somebody is injured and they can't perform, have you got the role of rehabbing them as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a couple of people in various shows, again, really non-specific about it, that are out for a slightly longer period. And my role with them, which is fantastic, is that I screened them. So when I screened all these people, I remember saying to them, look, we're going to get your single leg hop distance, and we're going to do press ups, and we're going to do balance, and we're going to do the star excursion balance test. Well, now I've got that information about where those guys were before they got injured. This is where the screening is so useful. So rather than saying, oh yeah, they've got a slight scoliosis, who cares? Or they're hypermobile, who cares? Everyone should do strength and conditioning work, including hypermobile dancers. So it doesn't matter. It's literally, it's so unimportant. Most dancers are hypermobile, you know. So, but I've now got scores for the dancers that are injured on the bigger capacity and will be out for a little bit longer, that I can now compare when they get back to end stage rehab. I can look at their hop distance, their jump height, their balance, their cardiorespiratory capacity. I've got all that information now because we screened for it initially.
Very good.
And I remember I said that to one of the dancers. We've got a girl who's got quite an nasty injury, should be out for probably a couple of months. I said to her, you remember all that stuff we did? It was worth it. Now I know what we need to get you back to. You know, that screening that's really worth doing, because now I'm not guessing and I'm not comparing it to her contralateral side. I know exactly what she was capable of when she came into the show. Ironically, she was one of the strongest dancers I've seen, and it was a traumatic injury that wasn't really her quote unquote fault. So it's really sad. But I've got the information that I need to know where I need to get her back to. Yeah, so it's really good.
And I think we were mentioning off air, because the word screening, there's been quite a lot of blogs about it, and people kind of think with screening, the idea is you're predicting injury, but you don't even call it screening anymore. What is it? What do you say you call it?
Well, me and another dance physio that I often chat to started calling it profiling.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. Good word.
So it's a slightly different, has a different undertone to it. And the dancers kind of, they don't feel like they're being judged. They feel like they're being helped. And that's really important to get across, because especially when I screen students, I'll say to them, look, this is for you, to help you. It's not for us to judge whether you're going to get into the college or not. It's not like it used to be. So I'm not trying to work out, can you do a high kick and is that good enough to get you into the college? I'm trying to work out, where are your weaknesses? What can we help you with? What specific exercises can I give you? In truth, if everyone even does just a basic general strength and conditioning program, everyone will benefit. That's been shown by research at Elmhurst Ballet. So they put I've talked about this in other things, but the 11 plus dance is something that's based on the FIFA 11 plus for footballers. It's been adapted for dancers. They put it into Elmhurst Ballet School. They had a reduction in injuries of around 40%. And that's everyone doing it. So whether they're hypermobile or they've got, you know, short hamstrings or whatever it is, or a slight scoliosis, by putting that on everybody, so not just the hypermobile dancers being told they've got to do strength and conditioning, everyone does it. And then a huge drop in injury rates. And that's by getting their cardiorespiratory fitness up, strength, control, landing techniques, balance. That's basically what that program does. And it makes a huge difference. And I spoke to the guy, so his name is Nico Kolokithas. He's on Twitter, just to give him a shout out. But I spoke to him about the fact that I was going to work in the West End again. I said, it's called the 11 plus. Is this still valid for adults? And he said, yeah, it's not been looked into as much, but totally, you can totally do it with adults. So that's a big, I often base a lot of the stuff that we do, and I will do going forward, on the 11 plus dance. Well, there'll be adaptions and there's things that we can do to make things harder or tailor it a bit more to specific shows. But the 11 plus dance is a great starting point. If you look it up on YouTube, they filmed everything. They show you how to progress, how to regress, what to look for techniques. So that's a really good resource.
Fantastic. Sounds really cool. That's good. Well, look, it's 9 o'clock now. I just want to bring up, because your website's got a load of great stuff on it. I'm going to put this on full screen, but people can still hear you, even though. So for people listening to the podcast, I'm just showing a screenshot of Liz Bayley with a Y, LizBayleyPhysio.com.
You've still got Steve's comment up about the worst trauma injury.
Oh, yeah, let's go. Sorry, Steve. I hope you've... yeah, I just saw that. Jeez. Yeah, Liz Bayley with a Y, Physio.com. And if you go there, and on that webpage, there's an awful lot of stuff which you should be looking at, especially if you work with dancers or you dance yourself. But yeah, there's a little link there at the bottom, Returning to Dance Performance After Injury Part 1. And if you click on that, then there's a blog when you scroll down. And I say it's a blog, it's fantastically long, but easy to understand and relevant to not just dancers. That's the thing I love about it. It's talking about specific case histories and people, but it's the way you analyze it and go through it and explain things and look at different factors. So I would definitely recommend that people go to that. Yeah, and when's part 2 coming? Because I scrolled down at the end. It said coming soon.
No, I know. Part 2 was what I based my Therapy Live talk on, and I said in the talk, I'll have it published in a couple of weeks, and I knew I was lying. It's been over a month already, but that's because I started my new job and I just got really busy. But I will publish it. It's literally written as a presentation. I've just got to put it into a blog form. But I think it's got some useful stuff, and that's not just for dancers. That's for any top athlete or any elite people that people might be working with in a sporting facility background, whatever. That crosses over, because it gives you all the end stage stuff, how to test them to see if they're ready for full performance. That's subjective and objective. So hopefully there's lots of useful stuff in there.
Definitely, it's a really good blog. And yeah. also there's lots of stuff you've done. You've done work with Jack Chu, so Therapy Live is worth checking out. People can still listen to that.
Yeah, they totally can. I think they need to sort of be a member on it. So you can't listen to it for free. But if you, I mean, God, the Choose Health and the MSK reform stuff that Jack Chu does it's invaluable for anyone who works in the MSK industry. It's just got such top quality, evidence-based, relevant stuff. So if you're going to spend any money on CPD, you could do far worse. And the amount of talks on there, God, I mean, the Therapy Live that I did, there were like 150 speakers or something, and I think per lecture it's like 20p or something. It's really like nothing, and it's got leading experts. Can't believe that I was involved in it.
There she goes again. Yeah, people love hearing that.
Well,
yeah, it's almost like you're a real physio now. So
it is.
Yeah, that's worth checking out. And also you've got you did the what's it called, Chewing It Over as well, which is a nice episode. You did the original Physio Matters podcast with Jack, wasn't it, interviewing, which is worth listening to. So there's a lot of information out there from you. And then you worked with Evie recently, didn't you? And with Bill, you did a podcast episode.
Yes, there's a lot, isn't there? There's quite a lot.
Yeah, I know.
I think some of this, I've been really busy. Some of the stuff we've talked about today comes up in those other things, but we didn't talk much about the screening, so hopefully that's new. But yeah, I mean, if you want to, God, it's a lot of me talking, isn't it? But
that's great. Liz, stop putting yourself down. Jeez, I understand why Jack was getting so angry with you now. Will you please stop?
I'm the worst.
It's all really
hopefully it's useful, and yeah, there's a lot to listen to. So if you're interested in working with dancers, I also did a talk for the Manchester Physio Society for students, and it was kind of it's on YouTube. So if you Google me, Dance Physio, Manchester University, you'll find it. It's like a talk about how to get into dance physio. And some of the stuff we've talked about today is on there, like a little bit about screening, but maybe not so much detail. Common injuries, those kinds of things. And
there's talk, isn't there, on the grapevine of a regular thing with you and Bill, maybe podcast-wise?
Yeah, because this has been a long time coming. So me and Bill Taylor, the consultant physio for the Scottish Ballet, had been talking about doing a podcast, and it's going to be called, God, what was it going to be called? I've forgotten the name. This is how long it's been. What were we going to call it? Oh, To the Point. So we're going to call it to the Point, spelt like the dance shoe, To the Point Physiotherapy or something. And we're going to try and make it patient-facing. So it will be specifically for dancers. So common injuries, how to manage them, first, like when you're first injured, the best steps to take, what you should and shouldn't do, what you should do for strength training, anything that could be useful for dancers, the kind of thing that I wish I had listened to when I was a performing artist, when I was a dancer. Yeah. So it'll be, I think physios will probably get a lot from it, and sports therapists as well, but it'll be more specifically for dancers, because there's not that much out there just for dancers in that kind of way, in a clinical way.
Fantastic. Well, I hope that comes to light. It
will. We're just both so busy, and we keep cancelling. We're like, let's do it this weekend, and then one of us cancels. So we'll do it.
I hope so. And anything else lined up? I mean, I know you've got loads of stuff going on. You've had a few, Cinderella, for example, has been closed for a while, but hopefully that will all be up and running again soon. And you're just busy for the whole of summer, are you?
Crazy busy. Like I say, the company that I got this new job with, I've always known about. I used to work with a different company. So in the West End, there's kind of big companies that often do the shows. I've worked now for two of the bigger companies. This particular company just seems to have every show going at the moment. So we're really, really busy, partly because we're coming out of the COVID situation, partly because we're going into the rehearsal situation for every show, like I said before. So it looks like I'm going to be really, well, so long as the shows stay open to some capacity, this is the thing. I'm assuming they will. Let's just hope we can get through it. But yeah, so more podcasts. I'm also going to be doing I'm still teaching dance, believe it or not, as well. Yeah. So I'm still teaching Argentine tango, a little bit of showgirl stuff off the back of my Moulin Rouge stuff. So I still do dance teaching as well. So lots of stuff.
Fantastic. Mel Coleman-Jones, thank you for your comments. Mel's just said, found this live really interesting as my daughter's a dancer and a gymnast. There's so much information I think Liz is showing that, again, most dancers aren't getting. So, I mean, it's across the healthcare really, isn't it? There's a lot of stuff which the average person isn't reaching and getting. So hopefully that has, Mel. And if you, like I say, if you need more information, then check out Liz's website. David Poulter said, in true straight to the point traditional style, great job. Thanks. So thanks, David. I'm glad we got your seal of approval. Even got a little Thank you, Simon. That's fantastic.
Thanks, Poulter. Thanks, Poulter. I'm honoured that he would listen. Bless him. That's great.
There you go. Right. So thanks, Liz. Really kind. Thank you for coming back for part 2. All I can think of now is we're going to have to do a part 3. So we'll give it kind of 5 months or something. But like I say, it sounds like, I mean, it's really interesting what you're doing, especially with the idea to research. I've got, for example, Emma Brockwell on my mind. Do you know Emma?
Yes.
Emma Brockwell, yeah. So she did the same thing with there was nothing on running, return to running for post-pregnancy. She got involved with Tom, and then bam, out come this paper which just took off. It was a gap there which wasn't around. So it sounds like you've stumbled upon a similar thing. So it'd be really exciting where that takes you. And also, like you say, this getting to work with athletes. We didn't get to talk about dancers being athletes. I have to have a part 3. But good luck with that. Sounds really good. You're definitely setting the scene, aren't you? You are the name now. Have you got used to that now?
No. You kidding? No, ridiculous. No, but I definitely get more emails from people with questions about dancers for sure. So it must be getting out there a little bit, but I'm happy to do it. I love social media. I've always used Twitter as a form of CPD. I think it's just absolutely brilliant. You can stick something on Twitter and get a diagnosis from all the top minds in the country. I mean, it's just fantastic. So I'm always on Twitter, probably to my detriment, but I think it's very, very useful to stay up to date with current topics. And so the fact that I'm kind of in that little world, and I'm friends now with people that I used to listen to podcasts for, which is I'm very very grateful, and that's important to me. So it's nice to do all this stuff, and hopefully it's helpful for people.
Fantastic. Apologies to who was it? Becky, wasn't it? We didn't get onto the subject of eating disorders. That often comes up, doesn't it, with dancers? But like I say, we'll do a part 3. Did you talk about eating disorders? You did that with Jack, didn't you? Did that
with
come
Jack?
Up?
Yeah. Just very quickly, but yes, there's no doubt dance is an aesthetic art form which brings with it certain levels of aesthetic requirements. Tends to be a bigger problem in ballet than in musical theatre, in my experience, I believe. But definitely something that's on your radar with dancers without question, and you should definitely know about how to screen for it, about issues with Red S, bone health, all of those kinds of things.
Cool. Okay then. Right, I'm gonna let you go, Liz, because it's 9:09. Thank you so much. That flew by. If people want to contact you, then you're on Twitter, which is Liz Bayley Physio. Is that you on Twitter?
Liz Bayley Physio. That's it. Follow me. I'm nearly at 2,000 followers now. Come on, guys.
Excited. That's fantastic. And if they want to contact you, is that the best place to contact you, or is it better through the website?
Either. You can either send me an email through the website, or Twitter's always good. Yeah.
Fantastic. There we go. Right. Thanks, Liz. Don't go away. I'm going to say goodbye to everyone now, but I'll say thanks to you personally in a second. People, next week on Tuesday, I'm on holiday. I'm in, where am I? Bodiam, somewhere called Bodiam, I think, along the south coast, camping. Which is hilarious because when you look at the weather, tomorrow's boiling, the next day's boiling, the next day's boiling. Come Monday when Matt goes camping, lightning, shower storms, hail. So I'm going to be in a tent with my 2 beloved children and wife, listening to the rain on the canvas, which will be amazing for 2 days. We're looking forward to it. But Mike Grice will be here, standing in as ever as super host with Gary as well, founder of the STA, Gary Benson, and it'll be an opportunity. It's a pure question and answer, industry questions, people. So we've already put a few posts out there. Anything you want to be covered next Tuesday to do with soft tissue therapy, sports massage therapy, at any level, industry related, then send them to Gary at the sta.co.uk, or send it to me, Matt at the sta.co.uk. And we'll make sure that goes onto the list for Mike and Gary, and hopefully a few of the reps who will come on cam as well to go through and answer. So that's next Tuesday at the same time. But on behalf of myself and the wonderful Liz Bayley with a Y, thank you very much for joining us. And I'll see you in 2 weeks, but hopefully have a great time with Mike next week. Liz, thanks again. See you all soon.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.